Welcome to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Negotiating, it's something that we never learn, but it's something that we need to navigate throughout our lives, whether it's for work, our relationships, negotiating for your loved ones, purchasing a product, and basically everything else. Now, when you negotiate, do you jump in and ask for everything, or do you stand back and see what happens? Do you wait? Do you answer immediately? The art of negotiations. And that's today's topic. I'm speaking with Fotini Iconomopoulos, speaker, trainer, and the author of Say Less, Get More. As a child, Fotini was nicknamed the negotiator. She is a master at this, and you'll see why. Welcome to Empowered. Fotini, so good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to begin with, I was mentoring a group of young university interns, and I told them that I would be speaking with you. And they got super excited and came up with most of these questions today. So negotiating is an art, and women are fearful of negotiating and afraid of saying the wrong thing. How do you prepare for a negotiation?
So, it's very common for women to feel that way, especially young women. And so they're my favorite audiences to talk to because I feel like they can have the biggest transformation. When it comes to preparing means doing your research. Preparing means knowing externally and internally what's going on. So externally, what are competitive rates like? What is the industry paying? What are job descriptions like in that organization and outside of that? And how do you compare against it? The internal piece of preparation is knowing, what do you bring to the table? What are your experiences? What are your transferable skills? How do they match up with what these folks are asking for? And when you do that, it naturally gives you a lot more confidence because you can see what it is that you're bringing. But if you're not prepared that way, it can create a real disadvantage going in there.
So, okay, let's talk about confidence, because that's something that a lot of women have trouble with, and it's a huge factor in negotiating. How do you build that confidence?
Well, the old adage of knowledge is power is certainly something that applies here. So the more you know going in, the more you know about the organization, the more you know about the job, the more you know about the industry, the more you know about the person with whom you're having a negotiation. If you haven't looked up their LinkedIn profile and know what's going on, that's a that's a big miss. But it's also preparing to go, okay, how does my skill set, how does my experience help them? Being able to frame it in words that are going to be meaningful to them, in wins that are going to be meaningful to them. So it's not just talking about stuff for the sake of talking about it. It's understanding how you fit in the organization and why they should get excited about you. That's the confidence will come when you have done that preparation in advance, when you know how to address those things, so that should a question come up that you're unprepared for, at least it's going to be in your recent memory to go, oh yeah, I've thought about this before. This isn't new and shocking to my brain. I know how to handle myself in this situation because I've considered it.
So, your book is called Say Less, Get More, which I think is brilliant because everybody overemphasizes and overspeaks so much. Tell us about why you wrote it.
The easy answer is because Harper Collins asked me to. So they saw some videos of me online, and we had mutual acquaintances and people that had been kind of saying my name in the industry or on LinkedIn or sharing stuff that I had been putting out into the universe. And so I was very flattered that they came to me. But when I asked the question, why another negotiation book? I've read a lot of them. Their answer was, we think you have a voice that people need to hear. And so when I started thinking that through, I realized that I had read a lot of books that did not work for me. I read a lot of really great books on negotiation and psychology, and I read some that had nuggets that I went, that wouldn't work coming out of my mouth, both from personal experience and from instinct. And so I wanted something that was going to be more inclusive. I wanted something that anybody could read and go, this is useful to me. I'm not left out here. It's not, well, that only works for, those people with privilege and so on. I wanted it to work for everybody. I use the analogy of it's the on-ramp versus the stairs. The privileged party can use the stairs, but everybody can use the on-ramp. So it's trying to make it as accessible as possible.
And I think that's a key here, because a lot of people think, this is not for me. I'm not a negotiator. I don't like conflict. I'm not sure that I can do this. But as you said, you've got an on-ramp and you could take the stairs. So when we come back, we're going to go to commercial break right now. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about the bias in negotiation, whether there is bias, whether there isn't bias. And basically, so many women work in male-dominated industries. So I want to talk about negotiating that way as well. So please don't go away. We will be right back. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today we're learning to negotiate. Fotini, is there a lot of bias in negotiation?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been countless studies on the subject of bias in negotiation, not just bias against women, but bias against people who don't fit that privileged norm. So whether you're a person of color, whether you're a woman, whether it's ageism, there's a ton of it, but there are lots of ways to also overcome it.
You know, it's interesting. The first show that I did on Empowered, I had Rita Torture on from the Globe and Mail, and she was talking about negotiating. And she basically said that she contacted a friend of hers and said, I need to negotiate, quote unquote, like a white man does, because I don't know what to do. And he basically said, ask for everything. And she said, I can't ask for everything. That's not who I am. It's not the way it works. And he said, ask for everything, you'll get 90%. So we work in male-dominated industries. Does negotiating work the same way for both male and female negotiators?
I it pains me to say it, but it doesn't work the same way. That doesn't mean that women can't ask for everything. It just means we have to be much more careful to do it in a way that is perceived as cooperative. Because the default when people are negotiating against women, and whether this comes from men or women, women will still treat other women in a negotiation with bias as well. The default is we are often perceived as gritty, as greedy, as aggressive, some of those words that we don't like to hear. And so we have to be very mindful of being perceived as cooperative, as being perceived as problem solvers. So we need to make our approach one that is going to be better received, because men are given a lot more runway for that aggressive kind of labeled behavior.
Okay, so, let's just continue on with that, because I saw on your Instagram page that you talked about rocking the boat. Should you or shouldn't you rock the boat?
You have to. If you want to change direction, I mean, I made the analogy on Instagram because I heard someone else say, never rock the boat. I'm like, but then you're just going to keep going in their direction. And so when it comes to when you're going on a voyage of some kind, if you want to go in your direction, you're going to have to rock it a little bit. I'm not suggesting you rock it so much that people fall off, that it capsizes and so on, but we rock it gently enough that people are going, okay, well, I'm with you on this. I might have a little bit of resistance, and that's why we have to do this back and forth thing. But that's what gets us to this new destination. If you don't rock the boat, you're going to be headed in their direction. You won't have a choice.
So, you're talking about rocking the boat. That causes a lot of stress for people. So let's talk about finding your mental health pause button when you are emotionally invested, because it takes a lot.
Yeah. And the closer you are to it, obviously, the more invested you are. It's very easy for me as a third party who goes in and coaches people to say, here's how you can handle the situation. It's very different when your fight or flight, freeze or fawn is all kicking in all at one time. So it is important to access what we call that mental pause button. I like to call it, I think of literally a button in the center of my forehead and go, how can I access that? The number one way you can access it is if you have done that preparation in advance. If you have thought about all of the things that you want to say and what you want to go after. If you have literally said the words out loud to create some muscle memory for your brain, so that in the moment, you're not stumbling over your words. Your brain goes, despite this fight or flight, I know where to find it somewhere. This is something that I can recall instead of constructing something from scratch under stress. It's finding things like, a moment of breath, whether it's a meditative breath of breathing in for 4 and out for 8, whether it's picturing yourself on a beach in Mexico with a margarita in your hand, whether it is repeating a positive mantra to yourself. Any of those things that work for you, you've got to find your coping mechanisms, but whatever it is, it's going to help you find that pause button. Breathing is the easy access one. Again, recalling something that you've already done, having that little pep talk with yourself that goes, I got this, I prepared for this. Those little things may seem trivial, but they go a really long way. And in fact, the one that I think makes the biggest difference for folks is something I picked up from Dr. Kelly McGonigal in her book, The Upside of Stress. She talks about the fact that our brains, basically the center of our brain that thinks about anxiety, is also the same part that processes excitement. So what if in the moment, instead of feeling anxious about this negotiation, what if you could flip your brain and go, I am so excited to show them what I'm capable of. I am so excited to show them why I deserve all of these things. If you do that, studies show us time and time again, you will have better results. You will prime your brain to perform better under pressure than if you did become a victim of your anxiety. So can you switch that anxiousness into excitement, and it goes a really long way.
You know what? I really like that. I like the fact that you've taken this stressful situation that people kind of walk away from because there's so much conflict, and you've turned it around and said, you know what? This is exciting now. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can get. Let's see how we do in this, because after all, it is a test. When we come back, we're going to talk about dealing with nonverbal expressions, because no matter how much you prepare, body language is a whole different thing. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. Today, we're learning how to negotiate. Fotini, you've been talking about being prepared and doing your research, but no matter how much research you do, how do you deal with nonverbal expressions? We watch a lot of the, we watched a lot of the campaigning south of the border just before the elections, and it's very different when you don't have that type of research.
I find that, I mean, anytime you're trying to react in the moment, I tell people I don't want you to be reactive. I want you to be strategic. And so it's about finding access quickly to that mental pause button to take a breath before you say anything, before you do anything. Can you have that mental breath so you can get the clarity to go, what do I need to do in this moment? I know a lot of people will tell me, but you could read everything on my face. Do you need to have that positive mantra to help you kind of rejig what your face is telling people to go, I've got this? Your face is going to say, I got this, versus I'm so freaked out right now in that moment. And I tell people too, if you're really worried about reacting, can you have something that will actually rechannel some of that energy? So if you don't know if you can have the self-control to not say anything verbally or otherwise or non-verbally, I actually recommend taking notes. Because even if you're taking notes, even if you're doodling something, I mean, I could bore you with details about what taking notes does to our brain and how it calms us down and all that kind of stuff. But if you're taking something, if you're writing something down, your energy will focus on that instead of expressing something. It gives you that built-in pause, a mechanical pause, to force you to recover a little bit before you say or do something, whether it was accidental or on purpose, that may work against your interest, so to speak. So I find taking notes not only prevents my face from giving everything away, it gives myself a chance to take a breath, to have that positive mantra. Maybe I want to write out that positive mantra. Maybe I want to write out the next question I'm going to ask. But I'm just creating some distance between my brain and my face so that I'm not giving something away. On the flip side, however, I want anybody who's going to deliver a message that is going to look confident to deliver it with conviction. So can you make sure that you're sitting up straight versus being buried behind a computer? Right. That's why I don't love computers in any type of difficult conversation, because quite frankly, it's not really a useful tool to take notes because your brain's actually not going to record it. Hit a recording device and do that, or handwrite it so your brain is actually processing it. But I actually just don't like the physicality of hiding behind a computer. It changes the way others perceive you. It looks like you're trying to hide, or you look small. And when you look small, the other party actually gets more aggressive if they're self-interested individuals. And I want you to feel like you own the space. Can you physically take up more space? Can you spread out your notes, your bag, your notebook, whatever it is in front of you, so that you are channeling this message across that says, I deserve to be here. I own this space. That's not aggressive. It's simply saying, I am present. I am here and I deserve to have a seat at this table. There's so many little things that go a really long way, not only to send a message to them, but to also psych yourself up again. It's that anxiety center in your brain that we're flipping the switch on. You can do it even with your physicality. So Dr. Amy Cuddy made, the phrase power poses famous by telling us to adopt the Wonder Woman or the Viva Victor, whatever it takes. Go into the bathroom stall before your meeting starts, and you can actually psych up your brain in addition to sending them a message that you physically deserve to be in this space. As a result of that, what follows from your mouth is going to come out in a tone that's going to sound much more credible, and that's going to be perceived very differently from the other party. They all kind of fall in domino effect.
So you just talked about tone too. Like, I love the fact that you're talking about being big, right? We need to make ourselves bigger, just to give us some stature before we go in and negotiate. But tone, there are so many women out there that keep asking, how am I heard? How do I make myself heard? And it's not about yelling or being louder. It's about being big, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, it's also just the sound of your voice. Are you doing this thing that makes you sound like you're asking a question when you meant to make a statement? This inflection is far more common in women than it
Yeah.
is in men, with inflection going down. In order for me to leave my previous position, here's what would be required in the compensation package versus in order to leave my previous position, this is what I would need. It sounds like you're asking for permission versus making a statement. So, how are you showing up physically? How are you sounding? Do you sound like you believe yourself? Do you sound like you're having doubt? Because if you're doubting yourself, I'm going to doubt you too. And that's not what we want in a negotiation.
I love that. And I use that when I media train people in the office as well. Your voice has to basically sell you. You can't be asking questions because you're not putting yourself forward that way. So you're 100% correct. And I love that. When we come back, I want to talk about navigating negotiations with parties who are difficult to connect with. So please don't go away. We'll be right back with more negotiations. Welcome back to Empowered. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski. We're learning how to negotiate with Fotini Iconomopoulos, speaker, trainer, and the author of Say Less, Get More. And as a child, she was nicknamed a negotiator, and we obviously know that now listening to you. So, Fotini, how do you navigate negotiations with parties who are difficult to connect with? It just feels like you've got some sort of a shield in front of you.
I mean, we have to remember that you don't have to be best friends with the people with whom you're negotiating. I talk a lot about the double bind of likability, especially when it comes to women. You need to be likable enough that people want to work with you, not so likable that they want to take advantage of you. But that doesn't mean that you have to be best friends with them. You just need to be liked enough so that they want to deal with you versus someone else. And we often mistake the fact that likability comes from giving people what they want. So it sounds like, well, I'll just give into that thing because I don't want them to hate me, or I'll do this extra thing, or I'll give them this extra thing out of my pocket for the sake of the relationship, because we're worried validly about the retaliation, about the consequences to a relationship. The fact of the matter is, you just need them to like you enough that they go, this is someone I would prefer to work with versus preferring to work with somebody else. This is someone I respect enough to want to continue and be curious about this. And so there's a few places where likability actually does come from. But overall, it comes from people feeling acknowledged. I was having a chat with a psychologist friend who said that, the science behind all of this is people want to be liked themselves. So can you show them that you like them without giving away stuff that's important to you? Can you do it in the form of finding something in common? And it could be something teeny tiny. It could be, hey, you like the color red? Me too. I like it so much I put it on the cover of my book. Or if you like decorating like a Christmas ornament, me too. Those are the little things that can go a long way in terms of finding that little bit of acknowledgement and that likability. Genuine compliments are another one. So that breaks the ice a little bit. And I say genuine because I always tell people we can smell a rat. If you showed up here with bedhead today and I started complimenting you on your hair, you'd be going, what do you want from me? It'd be one of those things where our spidey sense goes off. And so you can find something genuine. If you can make yourself curious about the other person, then you'll deliver in a way that is going to be perceived as cooperative. So that is the other big C. So it's finding something in common, it's finding compliments, and it's finding cooperative language. Those three C's are what are going to get you just likable enough that we can do something. The mistake I often see people making, especially when we're in like a Zoom environment like this, for example, people assume, okay, well, the meeting started, so we got to get down to business. They don't build in that time for likability. If you're doing the same thing over email, if it feels like you're hitting a brick wall, it's probably because you're starting at the brick wall. Can you warm up? Can you get that runway to be able to jump over the wall? So can you start with it? Thanks so much for getting back to me so quickly. Or I appreciate the detail that you shared with me on that. Those little things that make the other person feel like they're acknowledging me, they're listening to me, they're paying attention to me, and I now feel more liked than I did before. But don't get caught up in feeling like you've got to make them your best friend.
So we have a minute 30 left, and there's two important questions that I would like to ask you. Number one, so many young students are graduating and they get their job, and all of a sudden they have a contract placed in front of them. How do they negotiate their contract? And then after you've been in your job for a while, how do you negotiate a higher pay?
Okay. So the two most dangerous words in negotiation are I think, because that sounds like this is your opinion. And when I hear that, I go, well, here's my opinion. And now we're just arguing. But I want to replace them with the two most powerful words in negotiation, which are based on. Based on means whatever comes out of your mouth is going to be credible and is going to be prepared. And that goes back to where we started. So you're going to do your research and say, based on all of these things that I bring to the table, based on your job description and how I fit into it. That's where you're going to say, based on all of these things, here's what I would expect. Try not to do it over email because it's very hard to read cooperation over email. So send a message saying, thanks so much for getting that contract to me. I have a few questions. When's a good time for us to follow up and have that conversation to clarify that? It'd probably be a lot faster than going back and forth over email. Fast forward 6 months, when that time comes, you can say, based on all of these things that I've accomplished, here's where I see things playing out. How close can we get to that next promotion? How can we work on this cooperative problem solving solution together?
Fotini, thank you so much. This has been a real eye opener, and I know you'll help a lot of people today.
Thank you for having me again.
Fotini has 3 tips to elevate your earnings. Number 1, do your research, deep dive into your industry. Number 2, invest in skill development. As you become more proficient, you become more valuable to your clients and your employer. Number 3, know your value. Consider your skills, experience, and value that you bring to the table. Be assertive about your expectations in salary and talks. I'm Elizabeth Naumovski, and I'm here to empower you and make frugality fashionable. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.